Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to The Right Time, a Wave Sports and Entertainment original presented by Prize Picks. This is the wrong time. We do exclusive YouTube-only content on Tuesdays. Be sure to come back here every Tuesday for a bonus take that you can't get on the podcast. This week, we want to talk about the life of Quincy Jones, who passed away at the age of 91. 91 is a long, long time, man. I don't want to say I want to start by complaining because that feels like the worst way to do it. I ain't going to complain about the dead dude. Don't worry. That's not what I mean. I'm gonna complain about y'all. And it's not all of y'all, but this thing happened, and this can very easily happen with somebody of Quincy's age and stature, where he did these wild interviews a few years ago. I think they were coming off like promotion for his documentary or whatever, but he got out there and just told all the stories and gave all of the hot takes. And then I saw on the internet after he passed away, a lot of people like, rest in peace, Quincy Jones. Wow, look at this wild interview that he did. And like, I get that while also feeling like you don't have to participate in every conversation. Like, the interviews were dope. Yes, they said all the stuff, but the part that's why we're here, or the part that we care, is the way that Quincy Jones could be in a situation where he would have all of these stories to tell. And the way he wound up in this place to have all these stories to tell is he's a superstar role player. And what I mean by a superstar role player is, to me, what I think is most interesting about the career that he's had is that Quincy Jones's talent was making everybody else better, right? Rarely, if ever, in the things that we talk about involving Quincy Jones, is he the person who is out in front. But at the same time, what he wound up doing was so mind-blowing and groundbreaking in a lot of ways that he then wound up being seen as the person in the front. Now, from what I can tell, and what makes this interesting, is the people who were at the front of his projects seem to want to bring him to the front also, because I can tell you something, it's very annoying to work with somebody who got a background job and they want to be out front all the time. That's some real take that sort of behavior. Not like that sort of behavior. Talk about being all up in the videos, dancing, right? People want Quincy in the videos. They wanted him to be in the front of these things, or at least it appears. But I was like watching a lot of the tributes, and I watched the documentary that he and his daughter did for Netflix a few years ago. And I think my thoughts came in two directions. One of them was about him like as the superstar role player. And where I think that's important or interesting or something that you can take is that, and I always say this, being incredibly talented will only get you in as far in this world as it helps other people, right? Or at the very least, as far as it goes to make other people feel good. Like, you being extra dope doesn't do anything for anybody else on its face. There's got to be something that's served with it. It's got to be like some greater purpose that winds up coming from it. But where Quincy became the extra dope dude is all the stories are about what he did to make something better, right? So take and Fly Me to the Moon by Frank Sinatra, putting a swing beat to it, completely changing the whole thing about it, right? Frank Sinatra's calling Quincy in to be an arranger, making things better, right? The stories about how he produced things for people like Michael Jackson and all those other folks, right? Jay Adonde told me he saw something where he said that the best instrument that Quincy Jones had was the telephone, right? He had this amazing ability to be like, oh, okay, we're going to work on this project. All right. Boom, we need this guy to do this. Oh, we need somebody to write a song. I know this guy can come in and write a song. Oh, what kind of bass line do we need? Oh, okay, call this guy to come in and play the bass. Everything else, then all the people in the room, and then Quincy Jones steps back, let him go, tell somebody to turn this up a little bit, tell somebody to turn that down a little bit, whatever it is, boom, there you go, and it's done, right? But in the end, the goal is to not make it about him. Like, I don't feel like when I would listen to Quincy Jones productions that there's really a typical standard Quincy Jones sound. Right? Like, if you ask me to point to it, I could talk about he's really good at producing bass players. That's the one part that I could talk about. But overall, it's you go over here and you do what it is that you do, and then I'm going to make what you do better. And he did that to such a spectacular extent that we actually know his name, that we know who he is as the person, right? Another thing I noticed, there's a certain Forrest Gumpian quality to him where he like gets around all the people. Like, for example, right? He was born in Chicago, was on the streets there, as a teenager, he wound up moving to Seattle, and he just happens to meet Ray Charles. Ray Charles is, I want to say, 2 years older than him. And he just happened to meet Ray Charles, and they have this lifelong friendship and relationship and professional stuff that comes from this. Because somehow y'all's black asses both in Seattle at the same time, and you just happen to stumble upon him, right? Like this kind of story after story about Quincy that goes in that realm. And I just think it's so dope to be that person to make you better at the thing that you do. Give you an example of being able to do that while also staying out of the way. There's a lot that's made historically about the fact they got Eddie Van Halen to play the guitar on Beat It. Now, do I think that's the greatest Eddie Van Halen work? Neither here nor there. But the thing is, and the way that Ed tells the story is that Ed comes in and here's the way the song was going and basically chops that thing up and says, this is how my part needs to go. This is where it needs to go. Like, kind of rearranges the song. You're not going to do that typically around somebody as accomplished as a Quincy Jones, and they just going to let you. But like, if you're in the position to be there and hear it, and even being as big a deal as he was at that point, and being like, all right, cool, you got it. That's its own special gift, right? That's his own special talent that comes up. And so I was thinking about that in the sense that his ability to see all the people that could work together and to see the connections, that when you go back and you listen to like the Back on the Block record, right? He saw this merger or the similar spirit of hip hop to bebop. Like he saw that connection being there. And so what you wind up with is an album that's got Miles Davis, who also was a bit of a shapeshifter in the way that, not even a bit of, was absolutely a shapeshifter in the way that Quincy was. But, you know, you got all these jazz guys on a song with Ice-T and Big Daddy Kane and Kool Moe Dee. And to me, what makes it amazing is that you the guy that can get them all in the room. Like, you get these rappers to be like, yeah, sure, I'll come show up on a Quincy Jones record. You got to be the man to be in that place. So that was kind of a first thought that I had. The other that I had in reading the stuff about Quincy, my buddy Spencer and I had actually been talking about this a couple of weeks ago. And we were talking about Stevie Wonder's Ass. And Sean will love this as it wound up getting Spencer into Steely Dan mode, where we're just kind of looking up, you know, the credits on As, and Spencer's like, yeah, you always forget that there's an acoustic guitar. And then he looks it up, and it's acoustic guitar player is the dude that played on a lot of Steely Dan records. And so then we go and we Google it up, and we find this video on YouTube, and it's the guy saying that basically he just shows up, the song is already done, and Herbie Hancock's solo is already playing, and then Stevie just basically Stevie says to him, all right, go. And then he just messes around on the acoustic guitar and he plays basically what you hear on the track. And then once he was done, Stevie was like, oh, okay, thanks. Like, that was it. Like, you would think in your mind that you got to put all this stuff behind it. You got to get all these things figured out in order to get it done. And Stevie's like, no. What you did right there, that's going to be the thing to do, right? And so Quincy operated like that also. That was the point that Spencer made. And so Spencer pointed out this video for me. It's a guy named John Robinson. He plays the drums on Michael Jackson's Rock With You. And this is the story he tells about that, playing that drum fill to start the song.
We're in this little studio and we're 3 takes in and there's no magic. None. There's just the magic. We're just going through the motions. And all of us are looking at each other like, yeah. All of a sudden I look in the control room, Quincy gets up and Rod gets up. And Quincy stands right here and Rod stands right here, smoking his red Marlboros. He doesn't say anything in his British accent. He just looks at me. And and Quincy goes, JR, can you come up with an intro fill that the whole world will forever identify this song with? And I looked at him without doing that, and I go, sure, man. No problem. And I'm like looking over at Bobby and Hawk, and they're going like this.
Yeah, imagine somebody coming up to you and being like, hey, you think you could do something unforgettable right fast? But what Quincy seemed to understand is that doing something unforgettable maybe wasn't as hard as one would think. That it's not something that you're going to like overthink and come up like, it's not something you're going to scheme up, right? It's going to be something that in the moment, maybe you're going to pull into the air. Now, is that the greatest drum fill that anybody's ever played? I'm not a drum aficionado in that way, but I don't feel like that's a drum fill that nobody else could play, right? Like, I don't feel like JR is the only person that could have come up with that. But in that moment, JR was the only person that was in that room, right? And I feel like with Quincy, it was a recognition that the song behind it is going to be what carries this anyway. So you come out here, you play your fill, and guess what? When I hear that fill, I know what song is coming after that, no matter what. And most of you too. He was absolutely correct. And so he has a similar story with Will Smith about the role for the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. And you can find this on YouTube. It's too long, so I'm just going to tell you what the story that Will tells is. And so he's at some party, and he sees Quincy Jones and Benny Medina, who used to be a security guard for Berry Gordy, who in the end wound up being Jennifer Lopez's manager. But in between, he cooked up the idea for the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. It's loosely based on his own life. And so Quincy sees Will at this party, and he's like, yeah, you talked to Benny about the show? And he's like, yeah, okay. And so Quincy sees him at this party, and he was like, okay, cool. Let me set up an audition right fast. You're going to be ready? You'll be ready in 10 minutes? And Will Smith is like, what are you talking about, 10 minutes? He's like, no, man, I haven't studied. I haven't prepared. I need some time. Like, I need at least a couple of weeks. And Quincy's like, okay, well, in a couple of weeks, you know what's going to happen? He's like, Brandon Tartikoff. Tartikoff was the head of NBC. Well, something's going to happen with his kid or something like that. He's not going to be available for 2 weeks. And so he's going to push it for 2 weeks after that. And then 2 weeks after that, it's 30 days out. And then his right-hand man is not going to be able to come for whatever reason. And he looks at Will Smith and he's just like, 10 minutes. This is your chance to change your life. And Will Smith was like, all right, I guess I'll be doing this in 10 minutes. And then he went and did it in 10 minutes. And he changed his life. The audacity of that. You know what I mean? Like, just the sheer audacity. Not only the audacity of Quincy Jones, but the audacity that's so contagious to be like, why aren't you just like this? Right? Yeah, just go out there in 10 minutes, dog. You'll be fine. What are you talking about? That's how things work. Quincy Jones's life, Joel and I were talking about this. So Quincy Jones's life and career is so based on audacity in ways that I don't think that we could think about. So in the early 1970s, after Quincy's done the stuff for Frank Sinatra and he's done a lot of jazz arranging, he decides to go out to Hollywood to do movie scores because black people didn't do movie scores at the time. And it's wild in watching the documentary on Netflix where people are really talking amongst themselves and ask the question, well, can a black person do that? Like, they talk about us like literally like we're animals, not animals like savages, but animals like, wow, so you're telling me that a parrot can talk? Right? Like they can't believe, or they couldn't believe at the time that we could actually do things, whatever the hell the thing was. They didn't think that we could do things. And Quincy Jones just being like, yeah, okay, well, I'm going to be the guy that goes out here and then does that. Another documentary that's very famous, if you have not seen it, it's also on Netflix. It's called Black Godfather. It's about Clarence Avant. And Clarence Avant navigates the world in a very similarly audacious way. Where Clarence Avant, the story about Clarence Avant showing up, he called Hank Aaron because when Hank Aaron was going for his the Break Babe Ruth record, and he found out that Hank didn't have any endorsement deals lined up. And so Clarence Avant in 1973 or 4 calls up Coca-Cola and sets up a meeting. And he can't believe that they're not having this meeting. And he said, this is no lie. He said he sat down in the meeting, he looked at the people and said, y'all know how many drink Coca-Cola? And you got this man right here in your own city and you're not doing anything about it? And not only did Henry wind up with the deal, it was the biggest endorsement deal anybody had gotten. That's the audacity of these two dudes, right? These are the two dudes that just show up and decide, okay, yeah, well, this is the thing that we're going to do. And so what comes with that audacity, to me, is another level of brilliance that gets lost. And if you know me and know my career and a lot of the people that I've worked with, you know my favorite people to work with are musicians. And I mean like people who did music and then go into working on other things. So when I work with my buddies Hayes and Chip, those are music guys. And what I always loved about working with them is music guys see the big picture. I think music guys can take what they do in music and apply to more things than anything else because of their understanding of structure, what is necessary, emotional resonance, right? What all has to fall in the register. Okay, you need a snare, but a snare doesn't have to be a snare, right? A snare could just be something that's in that, that exists in that space in the register. Okay, somebody's got to keep time. We need this. Okay, it needs a groove. Okay, we need to build suspense here. Okay, we need to take this down here. Musicians can always come up with all those things. And that's how you wind up looking up. And that's how Quincy Jones is the guy that can put together the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, right? That's how Quincy Jones winds up being the guy to produce the Oscars or to produce the show for the opening of the Black People Museum in DC or whatever it is. Or all these things that he did is because musicians have an understanding that is much different than anybody else. And with him being a trained musician, he then on the music stuff can communicate with the musicians to make them understand the ideas that he's talking about, and then take those ideas and transfer them to do all these things in the world. And all these things that this dude did is because he looked up and was like, yeah, I think I can do that. It's all right there. And so when you look at everything that a dude like Quincy Jones did and the way that he stayed young with it, right? That connection to hip hop while also looking at them folks in the mid 90s and being like, being careful because y'all all going to die if y'all keep going in the direction that y'all are in. Carrying it forward to now to having like a real relationship with Kendrick Lamar, right? Talked to one of my partners who works in music in LA, and he said the thing about Quincy was when you saw Quincy's name on your caller ID, you were happy about it because he was cool like that. He stayed connected to all of this stuff because his brain and his mind and his audacity never stopped. And so, hey, those interviews, they were really cool. They were really audacious. But there's a reason why that man was able to know all those things, and the reason why he was in that room, at all those rooms, at all those times. And it was because of his work and of his spirit. I can't be sad when somebody 91 years old dies. They were 91 years old. You know what I mean? I'd be sad for 91 if 91 didn't squeeze every drop out of it that was there for that 91. This man squeezed every drop out of it. He one of the people that make you look up at your own life and be like, yo, am I really doing what I can? Because this dude did things because nobody said stop. He said something in one of these documentaries that I thought was most interesting and that I will leave you with. And somebody asked him, I can't remember who it was, but it was about how it is that he doesn't get caught up in ego, in his own ego. And he said, the way you wind up not getting caught up in your own ego is keep trying to do more things. And this last part is me paraphrasing, but if you have not been humbled, you have not tried, right? If you have not reached something to make you be like, oh, you can't do everything, it's because you did not try to do enough things. And this man tried to do not just enough things, he tried to do all the things. And I honestly don't even know how he wound up being humble because he was so goddamn good at every single one of them. The NBA is officially back, which means you can turn $10 into $1,000 in a single game watching your favorite teams only on Prize Picks. You can make a Prize Picks lineup between the NFL and the NBA in as little as 60 seconds. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of players and stat types are what make Prize Picks the #1 fantasy sports app. So make sure you go to prizepicks.com/Bomani and use code Bomani for a first deposit match up to $100. That's prizepicks.com/Bomani. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy.